Hello, my name's Kate Ivy. I manage the Positive Change Service for the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. And in Tower Hamlets, we're having a rethink of our approach to domestic abuse. And the reason for that is to tackle a certain amount of system-generated risk. Let me explain to you what I mean about that. So let's just imagine that your child is bullied at school and perhaps a bigger kid than them breaks their phone or a toy or something like that, and your child is called into the head's office and they are kept after school on a course learning how to avoid and stop bullying against them. And they're told, what's more, that if they can't keep their stuff safe in school, the school is going to confiscate their stuff from them, or they'll just be excluded from the school. And you sit and listen to this, and then you ask, what have you done with the bully themselves? And the head teacher says, well, we tried to call the bully in. We sent a message out saying that we'd like to talk to the bully, but they didn't respond. And you know how bullies are, they're kind of hard to access. This is actually how child welfare systems the world over respond to domestic abuse. And it's probably no surprise that most mothers who have been involved with child protection around domestic abuse against them, if they were to be really honest, would come away with one key bit of learning from that. And that is, keep it quiet, don't call the police, minimise it, deny it, say it's all gone away.
At first, I didn't want to keep calling the police every time we come because I was worried social services is going to get notified and they're going to blame me.
That's your biggest fear.
And it's like you want to do the right thing and they tell you call the police, but then at the same time you're scared that social services is going to think that
you're not protecting children.
Of course, we all want to keep children safer. So how do we actually work with domestic abuse to avoid these kinds of unintended consequences of systems involvement? So I'm talking today to Anna Mitchell, who is the Safe and Together Institute UK lead. What is the Safe and Together model, Anna?
The Safe and Together model is really trying to create more domestic abuse informed child welfare systems, and it gives a clear framework of what domestic abuse informed practice looks like. And it's trying to tackle some of the issues you've talked about, where we might have really high expectations on mothers, or where they might be seen as failing to protect their children and seen as responsible for the impact of domestic abuse on their children.
Did either of you ever feel blamed by social workers?
I felt like a perpetrator.
Yeah.
I felt like I was a perpetrator. I was treated the same as he was. Not even the same, worse, because the children were with me. So the onus was on me to keep them safe.
Three principles that the Safe and Together model has. The first is that we really need to, wherever possible, keep the child safe and together with a non-offending parent. The non-offending parent, usually the mother, is our best ally in keeping children safe and providing stability, nurturance, healing from trauma for the child. The second principle is that we really need to partner with the non-offending parent, that we need to make sure we have positive, good relationships with the non-offending parent, that we validate their protective efforts that they're making. And this is where gender can sometimes come into it, because a lot of the time we have quite high expectations placed on mothers and quite low expectations placed on fathers.
But it's not just around their parenting, it's kind of around their engagement with the services as well. So we have, on the whole, the weight of the children's social care response falls on mothers.
And then the third principle is that we need to hold perpetrators accountable, that we need to engage with them where possible, but also that we just need to hold a perpetrator pattern-based approach where we focus on what they are doing or not doing and how that impacts on the child and child safety and how the family functions. The other thing I think we can do is really try and create more behaviourally focused case plans that are specific about the expectations that we have on perpetrators around their behaviour change.
In terms of partnering with victims, What about the when social workers feel that victims of domestic abuse are nonetheless minimising the abuse to them or not being honest with them?
I do think that in the past when I've met the social worker, because my back is already up,
Yeah.
I'm not being totally honest with her or him, and I am kind of, I'm giving off. I know in the past that I've given off the vibe because my kids have realised it. I remember one time a social worker was leaving and my little girl at the time, she slammed the door on them because she wanted them out. Obviously that she'd either heard me either on the phone to mum or something, worrying about these people coming, and she'd got worried herself.
I think a lot of the time what we talk about when we say a perpetrator pattern based approach is we apply that to that circumstance. What you might get is a description of quite a scary man who may be making threats about how social work may respond to the woman, who might be saying that they're going to remove her children. What then becomes more understandable is actually why it is that survivors may not be engaging with us in the way that we might expect. There's ways that we can tackle that. We can say, I understand why you might not be able to be completely honest with me because I understand that your partners might be threatening you, that we don't know fully what it might be going on. I want you to know that I understand that and that he is responsible for the impact of the domestic abuse and that we're here for you.
I had social workers where I couldn't say how I was feeling so low and emotional and I couldn't cry in front of them. So I put this barrier up because they said, we may have to get an evaluation of your mental health because if you're not, maybe you need a break, maybe the children could go into somewhere. It's like that's my biggest fear, losing my children. It's like, that's what's been hanging over me for years. That's the main reason I didn't leave. And now you're saying that you might take them away from me. It's like, because I'm saying to you, I feel low and I need a bit of help. That's not me being weak, I'd say, and I know people use this word a lot, but I don't think it was depression. I think it was shock and trauma and post-traumatic shock, and it's working through that, not I wasn't clinically ill.
When the victims carrying again a lot of the sort of damage of the abuse, how do you get focused back on the perpetrator again in those situations?
One of the tools we have in Safe and Together is called Multiple Pathways to Harm, and it's a really useful tool to map perpetrators' patterns and how they impact on the child. A lot of the time we start thinking about trauma impact of children seeing or hearing maybe acts of physical abuse, and those are really, really relevant in terms of risk to the child. But what the assessment tool allows us to do is think a bit more widely about how the perpetrator's behaviour may have impacted on the wider family ecology, as well as really thinking about how does the perpetrator's pattern of coercive control impact on the survivor's parenting capacity. And starting to unpick some of the things we know about how perpetrators may have caused or exacerbated substance abuse or mental health issues, how they may have undermined the authority that the mother has with the child. And sometimes it's about telling that story of where survivors' issues might have come from or how perpetrators may have used them to further control and abuse.
Yeah, I'm working with someone at the moment whose son is, by his description, a mini-me. He is... he's really quite aggressive, including with his mum, and the parents are separated now. And the dad says things to his son. He goes, we better get you back on time from contact, or what your mum's like, she'll do her nut, or we don't want to have your mum giving us grief for this and that. And so there's this constant, it's very subtle undermining of her in the children's eyes, as well as the direct impact he's had on that boy.
We need to think about these behaviours, which look like they're adult-to-adult behaviours, in the context of how they impact on the child and family functioning, and recognise that they are parenting choices. The systems that have been set up haven't helped practitioners know how to manage some of the complexities around domestic abuse. I certainly know in my social work masters, we maybe had half a day's training on domestic abuse, and it was very much focused on, you know, the survivor separating or moving home as being the solution to domestic abuse. And we also get very little training on engaging with fathers in general, never mind perpetrators as fathers. So often you hear people saying, she's doing this, she's not leaving, these are her issues. And it can be really helpful for us just to say, could we start talking about what his behaviour is? What are the things that you're concerned about that is about his pattern of abuse and control? So just starting sentences with he instead of she can be a really useful tool.
Yeah, so rather than saying things like this woman's a historical victim of domestic abuse as if that's her identity and defines her, to say things like he has been hitting and kicking for the last 5 years and speaking to her in these ways, and so listing those behaviours rather than just saying she is something.
And listing behaviours that are in previous relationships, you know, in the same way as we think about sex offending, we don't think the risk is gone because a sex offender's in a different family, because the risk is placed with the perpetrator. You know, one of the ways we can partner with survivors is actually saying, you know, how did you manage to leave these previous relationships? You know, that's a strength. Those are things that you were doing that are protective.
Even in the current relationship, I often see in reports that she repeatedly takes him back, where it could as easily be seen as she has repeatedly managed to separate from him. How has she done that? And how is it that he's kind of got her to trust him again, or wangled it that she will come back to him? It might be trust, it might be fear. How has he managed to sort of draw her back into a relationship?
When we look at survivors' behaviours, that we can't fully understand them without understanding the perpetrator's pattern of coercive control. So when you're working with survivors, ask them what was safest about doing that, rather than saying, why did you let him in? What was safest about letting him in? And actually validating they'll be making protective efforts when they are making these really difficult decisions and choices.
Absolutely. I think when you are the less physically strong party, you develop all sorts of ways to manage risk and protect yourself, which don't involve going, no, you know, like that. That's quite an unsafe thing to do. If somebody approaches you on the street and feels dangerous, we find all sorts of ways to manage that risk by, in some ways, trying to make nice and de-escalate along the way. It's a natural part of safety planning. I notice as well that we often ask a victim to get rid of the perpetrator. You must separate, you must get them out of the home, you must... And, you know, often I think we're asking them to do it because we are nervous to go to the perpetrator and say, you must stay away or else we will see you as not protecting your children.
I mean, we're really focusing on the wrong person, aren't we, if we're saying that survivors are responsible for the domestic abuse and that they can somehow end it. If survivors could end domestic abuse, it would have ended. You know, the person who can end it and the person who's accountable and responsible for that is the perpetrator. And, you know, documentation is a really critical part of that, because what we saw in various case file audits is almost quite a bland, non-descriptive, there's a history of domestic incidents, or there's a difficult relationship, or this is a chaotic divorce, or, you know, things that tell us nothing about the pattern of behaviour or the risks to the child. So one of the things that the model really focuses on in the core training is an entire day on documentation, where we really get better at describing perpetrators' patterns and really documenting the behaviour, the impact on the child, and also survivors' protective efforts. And, you know, one of the things that we try and think about is how we could write letters or leave phone messages that are really clearly saying to the perpetrator, you not turning up or engaging with me is a parenting choice, and I will document that in the case file. And that has a very different flavour to it than did not attend.
Yes, I often will find myself saying to someone, unless you'll talk about what you've done and how you can behave differently and engage usefully to bring the risk down, then we are going to have to document that you're not willing and ready at this stage to make safer choices, to work with us around parenting your children better.
We need to be really, really clear that what has to change is the lived experience of the survivor and the child, and their ability to be freer in their lives, not how people present to us or present in a behaviour change programme.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, because there are different typologies of perpetrators, and there are those that do present as very chaotic, broadly aggressive, might intimidate workers, and then there are those that really don't present like that.
Actually, even in situations where children are sadly removed, that we document the history of that and how the perpetrator's pattern has impacted.
What I'm seeing at the moment is a real incapacity of the system and our resources to deal with those practical environmental things that corrode people's capacity to leave and make safer choices.
How is the perpetrator using those things to further abuse and control or take away the survivor's agency? If housing's an issue but the perpetrator is causing evictions, if money's an issue but the perpetrator isn't contributing financially, then that's them using some of those issues.
So let's just finish with thinking a bit more about the idea of social workers partnering with and working with survivors, victims of domestic violence and abuse.
My last social worker was like, I was calling my angel. Because I really feel like I was at my lowest ever. And she came in and it's like, I was like you, my back was up because of my previous experience. And she came to the door and it's like, the minute she was outside the door, I was like, I was shut off. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't answer any more questions. I can't keep going over this. It's just digging it up. And she came in and just straight away, she had such warmth and she was talking to my children and she wasn't judging me from the very beginning. She was very much, you paid for a terrible experience. And I know, and I said it earlier, your confidence must be so low, and what you need now is someone to lift you and to tell you it's going to be all right, and you are strong, and you can get through this, and you've been strong enough to leave. This is your first step, and now we're going to take each day as it comes, and we're going to, and I began to open up to her, and I felt so much guilt, and I needed to regain my children's trust too. And when you have social workers criticising you or telling you doing things wrong in front of your children or undermining you, it knocks their confidence, your own children's confidence in you as a mum. And she never did that to me. Even when I cried, even when I was like literally on my knees, she'd say, this is not me. This is what, this is part of it, your healing. And we're going to have days like this, but you know what, you are going to get through this. And not once did it, I look forward to her coming. She was like my safety net. And I could share anything with her and be honest. And I was like, I think that is the safest thing for children too. If I say I've done something wrong, she'd never say you've done this wrong. She'd say, okay, we've tried it this way. Why don't we try it this way? Let's see if this maybe works. We can only give it a go. I never felt like a thing was being pointed at me or I was being criticised.
Thanks so much for your time, Anna.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a really interesting conversation. And if people want to know more about the Safe and Together Institute, you can go to safeandtogetherinstitute.com. We've also got a learning academy, academy.safeandtogetherinstitute.com. There's loads of free resources, e-learning, training, everything's up there. There's a global community of practitioners that are talking about how you apply Safe and Together. So we would welcome anyone to join.
And I'm really glad that Hamlets is rethinking our approach to domestic abuse and will be pulling very much into line with Safe and Together principles as well. So thank you, Anna.